you'd have these people who are 18 to 25 who were feeling a bit lost, a bit unsure about the choices they had made in year 12, and they wanted that direction or support or just hearing other people's stories about how they had grown their career. And you just saw that light bulb moment of where they go, oh, this is what I should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
This is where I should be taking my life. And seeing them change degrees or change careers to really make an impact in the healthcare sector.
That was Marian Casey, Deputy Commissioner of Volunteering for St John, New South Wales. Wow, what an episode we have for you today. Marian is a special person that has achieved so much in such a short amount of time. So I suggest you listen on if you want to be inspired to take on challenges and shoot for the stars. Among her many achievements, Marian has been awarded the Western Sydney Woman of the Year, the Western Sydney Volunteer of the Year, and most recently was promoted to the Deputy Commissioner of Volunteering for St John, New South Wales, overseeing a program of 3,000 plus volunteers and cadets. Like so many of our podcast guests, Marian's journey with St John started as a volunteer herself back in 2010, working at many music festivals, emergency relief situations, and helping people in need. Across her journey, she's been a beacon of support and diversity, championing positive experience for fellow volunteers. Her roles in logistics, member welfare, and event planning have left an incredibly positive mark on the organisation, earning her accolades such as the prestigious Order of St John and the National Emergency Service Medal. I hope you enjoy the podcast as much as I did recording it. All right, Marian Casey, welcome to the Engage Volunteer podcast. How are you?
Good, thanks. Bit hot and sunny and muggy in Sydney today, but otherwise enjoyable.
Well, look, it's a real treat to have you on today. Look, your role at the moment, full-time, is at the SES in change management, but also in your spare time, which I'm very fascinated by, is also the Deputy Commissioner of Volunteering at St John's, New South Wales. You do 1,000 other things, but my first question, how do you handle it all?
This is a question I get asked so often, is how do I find the time to do everything? I think one of the best things that I got out of lockdown was eliminating travel and having time where I looked at what I did and how I could utilize my time the best. And since coming out of lockdown, I've implemented a lot of those things to my everyday life, returning back to the office. So, when I'm in a coffee line, who can I have a conversation with? Who can I send an email to? Who can I give a phone call?
Wow.
It's about using every minute of the day to my advantage and ensuring that I enjoy using different hats, because different hats makes me passionate, energized to keep going until sometimes 10 o'clock at night.
I love it. And many hats you do have. And obviously, they're the roles you're playing at the moment. There are more, but as well, just to recognize some of the achievements you've had along your journey, which has been a fascinating one. Look, I would like you to go into more of them as we go, but for me, what really stood out was the Western Sydney Woman of the Year last year, and also the volunteer in 2022, was it?
Yeah, 2022 Volunteer of the Year for Central Sydney.
I mean, that's no mean feat. These are massive achievements to win. And so I would love to, as we go through today, for you to unpack it a little bit around how you've got to there. But what I'd love to do is almost start with, we're at the point where we are today, and which is fascinating. But what I'd love to understand is how you've got into these roles, what drives you. I know you started in education somewhat at Macquarie University back in the day. Do you want to take us back to there? Because it's not a linear journey, is it?
It is not at all. I think when people ask me about where my journey started, I actually go back to high school. So I really got enthusiastic about volunteering in high school when, we had things like Daffodil Day or fundraising days where, you could put a stand up together, you would work as a team and you'd have a common goal. And that kind of, energized me. And what really changed it was when I was in year 8, I had an opportunity, because I was really good at science at school, to go along to the Australian Youth Parliament for the Environment. And that was teenagers from all around the country going to Canberra to talk about how we could do better with causes at a local level in terms of the environment. And I got to meet people like Peter Garrett and Peter Brock, and who really inspired me. And wanted me to do more in my local community. And so I always talk about the yes and. So my sister is actually a high school drama teacher who works for Bell Shakespeare. And, in drama, they talk about the yes and when you're doing improv. And for me, any opportunity that comes my way, I first think about, oh, what am I giving up, or what do I have to do? What are the challenges? And do I even have the capability to do that? But then I go back to the say yes, because you never know where an opportunity is going to take you. And that's kind of where I've always learnt something new and been able to take on these great opportunities that I didn't think I was capable of doing.
Yeah. And funny how there's always some sort of little moment people can recall back to around someone challenging you a bit, right? And saying, hey, like, you're a talented kid. You could do more if you wanted to do more. Was it a bit like that? Do you recall?
Yeah. So I always did really well in science and in art in high school. And so there was always opportunities that came across from teachers. They were always encouraging me, always asking me to try things outside of class. In particular, I became a school prefect for social justice in year 12 as well. I remember doing a lot of things in that aspect of what we could do at a local level in our community. But when I went to university as a student, it's a whole new world. The opportunities aren't as obvious as they are in high school. So it took me a while to figure out what I wanted to do outside of study and what I wanted to do to really still make that impact. And it took working in a bar to really open those doors and really find the niche that I loved, and where it was involving not only going out to events, but also having those opportunities to teach and give back to people.
Funny, the working in the bar, pouring some beers, I see. Talk to me more about that.
Yeah, so when I was in university, I worked for the Bavarian Beer Cafe. So that's
Oh, I
pouring
love that.
beers
Yeah, yeah.
and learning about the history of beer and what makes a good beer. And I loved the science behind that. And
Wow.
even just when I was teaching and mentoring other people on their first shift, it was all about, making it meaningful to them, and how it's not just about, putting liquid into a glass. It's about, the mechanics behind it all. So I was teaching one day a nursing student, and I said, great shift, really enjoyed working with you, hope to see you tomorrow, because tomorrow is Australia Day and it was the busiest day of the year for us. And she's like, oh, I won't be there, I'll be at Big Day Out volunteering. And it just tweaked something in my head where I was like, what's that? Tell me more about that. I want to know more. And the next shift that I saw her, I asked her about it. I said, what do you do? She's like, oh, well, we do a quiet space for people who are overwhelmed at the event, and then sometimes provide medical care as well with an organization called Unimed Australia. And within a week, I think I was volunteering with them and on a 2-day course to learn more about first aid. I had no first aid experience at that point.
Mhm.
And I think within a month, I was doing logistics, membership, engagement, and within a year, I was commanding and team leading major events for them.
Wow. What age were you at this point?
I think 19, 20.
Yep, sure.
I can't remember exactly now, but around that time, I know it was second year of university.
Yep. Yeah, fantastic. So you enjoyed, was it that you enjoyed the music festival side or the helping people side, or just a nice combination of both?
I think the initial draw point was going
Yeah.
to events and
Yeah.
being able to
Fine.
see the music.
Yeah.
And, especially there were some big acts that,
Yeah.
you could see at music festivals. And it was covering a lot of the events at the Horton Pavilion as well, which is a big venue in Sydney. And then it was the making friends with everyone, like making those really close connections. And then you give someone a band-aid because their shoe is broken, or cutting their jeans because they're too hot and they wore the wrong clothing to the event, and they're giving you a big hug or a big smile and just saying that you made their day.
Yeah.
That really kept me going back again.
I think we should almost have another whole episode on your random experiences at music festivals volunteering in St John's. There could be some fascinating stories that you may or may not be able to tell live on air.
Yes.
But all right, so as we continue down the journey, then obviously with St John's, where you got started as a volunteer as well. Do you want to talk to me more about that experience and how you got in there?
Yeah, so I had been volunteering for UniMed for a couple of years, and the job opportunity for a brand new medical school at Macquarie University came up, and I at that point just finished my degree, but I had felt that in uni med that I had learnt as much as I could. I had been thrown, I don't want to say thrown in the deep end, but I had learnt very quickly how to do things, and I wanted to keep learning more, but I didn't have a mentor or someone to turn to help me keep growing. And the first week I started at Macquarie University, a friend who was in uni med was also in St John and said, "Hey, we've got a local division here that meets on a Monday night. Why don't you come along?" And I was very skeptical again. I doubted whether I was going to fit in, whether it was the right move for me, but I thought, why not? I've got nothing to lose. I'm already here. I just have to go to another building, just go and see what it's like. And within a couple of years, I became an officer of that division. I then became the 2IC and eventually the superintendent for Macquarie University Division, and that was looking after about 50 volunteers and a mixture of university students, people in the local community, and healthcare professionals who also lived around the area who could then provide that mentoring and support to people who were thinking about doing postgrad medicine or thinking about transferring from law to nursing or, that was my favorite part of that local group, is that you'd have these people who are 18 to 25 who were feeling a bit lost, a bit unsure about the choices they had made in year 12, and they wanted that direction or support or just hearing other people's stories about how they had grown their career. And you just saw that light bulb moment of where they go, oh, this is what I should be doing. This is where I should be taking my life, and seeing them change degrees or change careers to really make an impact in the healthcare sector.
Yeah, interesting, hey? And it would be such, for you now, I'm sure, so rewarding looking back on so many of those interactions. There would be thousands of these interactions you've had, from putting the Band-Aid on the person with the sore foot at a festival to helping young people navigate through the nervousness and uncertainty of early days of uni with that. And all of this obviously is voluntary work. It's often a question I ask around, how did you manage to sustain yourself as well? Because other listeners, I suppose, are going, well, that's well and good, but I've also got 2 kids at home. I need to put food on the table. I suppose you were younger then, but I know you're doing it now. So how did you find the balance there? Did it ever get too much for you?
Yeah, of course. I think with even your full-time job, sometimes things can become too much, and you do have to have that resilience and have that great support system around you. So I was very lucky when I was running a division that I had a great management team, and I was great at delegating tasks to people, but also getting them to own their portfolio. So I gave them the opportunity to grow and make it their own, rather than, I have had leaders that micromanage or authoritarian leaders, and I knew that that wasn't the experience that I wanted to give to other people. I wanted them to feel included, but also for them to own it. I found something that was also really great is having a shadow for every portfolio or every officer within my division. So there was always a backup. If someone went on holidays, if someone needed study leave, there was always someone who at least knew enough that they could take that role over for a few weeks.
Wow.
And that gave me that sense of security of, if everything fell apart, we still had that backup to make it happen.
Yeah. And if we timestamp this, how old are you now in this journey?
So I think it was about between 28 to 30 was the main time that I was building that division.
Yeah. But I mean, still, 28-year-old, I mean, your answer there would be suitable for a 50-year expert in this field, right? Showing a fair bit of maturity there to be able to sort of build teams around you, get out of the way. We often talk a lot in this podcast about just either putting it on your back or, empowering others. How did you come about that? Did you learn it from stuffing it up, or was it just something you had about you that you knew you couldn't survive without getting others involved?
I think it's a bit of both. I learned through my own mistakes, but also what I learned through as well, watching other people and what they do in other situations that might be similar or different. So working, and in a university sector, you're working with some very intelligent, smart, very capable, amazing people who are doctors, surgeons, engineers, and you saw people who were great managers and great leaders, and ones that were, even though they were very intelligent, didn't have the skill set or the knowledge of how to apply that intelligence to teams and to groups. So one of my favorite people in the world is Professor John Cartmill, who at that point was the director of surgery. Very intelligent, very capable, but he was the type of person who made you feel that when you were having a conversation with him, nothing else mattered in the world, and he had all the time
Wow.
for you to
Yeah.
have a conversation.
Beautiful.
Even though you knew that he had 100 things going on in his brain and that he probably had a patient waiting for him somewhere to have a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. It's good you recognize that, I suppose, as well. Hey, like, and learn from those people for your communications now, which I'm sure you're dealing with people of all ages, demographics, right? With St John's in particular. So I guess we're taking you into your 30s then in your journey with St John's. How did the deputy commissioner role come about? And it was fascinating to me that this is a voluntary role you're doing on top of your full-time job. How did this journey come about?
Yeah, so there was actually a step in between what's called a hub leader,
Yep.
which, other people might call it like an area manager. It's looking after a couple of divisions or units. So I'd come to a point where I realized that after I think it was about 5 or 6 years, I had been the superintendent looking after Macquarie University Division. And I had a few people come up to me with, hey, Marian, I've got this really cool idea that I want to implement or try. And my brain automatically went, we've already tried that. I didn't verbalize it to this individual person. I was like, great idea. Tell me about, put a 1-page plan together or a business case. But because I had felt that automatic reaction to it, I went, oh no, I'm becoming stagnated. I'm not maybe the person who needs to be sitting in this spot anymore. And maybe I need to give the reins to someone else and give them a chance and an opportunity, because I don't want to be that person that goes, no, we've already tried that. Let's keep doing the same thing again, not changing or innovating.
It's a fascinating one, and one we see all the time with different nonprofits. From one to the next, it can be a similar looking organization, but often there's a personality sometimes towards either an organization or the people you deal with. You would have seen both sides of that, but you were able to recognize that in yourself, that you were going down that path.
Yeah. So I then saw an opportunity to become a hub leader, which is looking after 5 divisions and being their mentor, helping them escalate any issues, but also planning and looking at ways that they could engage with their community and collaborate with each other as well. So I did that for 3 years, which was during the bushfires, the start of COVID, and the floods as well.
My
And
goodness.
then yep, which was just picking up the phone was the best thing I could always do, is just send someone a text and say, how are you going? Do you want to chat?
As a volunteer, sorry, just to be clear, yeah,
Yeah.
you were communicating amongst your team, yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
And during that time, I found I actually had more capacity to do a few more things because I didn't have as many people reporting to me, 50 versus 5. So I actually started doing some projects instead. So I started a bushwalking group to get people out and about and away from. So this was in 2019. I helped support us get into the Mardi Gras parade for the very first time in St John. When someone told me no for 5 years, I finally got it across the line. If someone says to me, no, you can't do that, Marian, I'm very much the type of person that goes, watch me.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed the project side of things and wanted to keep doing that. And the CEO at the time, Sarah Lance, had a conversation with me that she saw big things for me in the future. And I hadn't seen that in myself. And I didn't know what that meant. And I didn't know what I was going to do with that piece of information. And about a year later, during the second lockdown, the role came up for deputy commissioner. There was 2 roles available. So one for advisory, which is looking at projects and policies, and there was one for volunteering, which is looking after the operations side of volunteering. So that's 3,500 volunteers reporting to you, including almost 1,000 cadets. So a cadet is someone who's aged 8 to 18, which is a big, big weight to know that you have those reporting to you. And I had a big conversation with my husband at the time and said, do I go for this? I'm unsure if I have the skill set. I'm unsure if I have the time. We were going through our own fertility journey at the same time as well. But I thought thought I pretty much had nothing to lose by just applying and having a go. I'm sure they had lots of applicants. I don't know. You never find out. But I had to have a couple of different interviews in order to get the role. And I asked a lot of questions to the person who had previously done it about what was the time commitment, what were the biggest obstacles, what would they have wanted to know when they first started the role, and what support systems did they have in place.
Yeah. I mean, you touched on the Peter Garrett when you're in year 8, and then having a CEO when you're mid early 30s to say, hey, like I see something in you, feels like that was a big moment for you, right?
Yeah, especially because I think if you had asked me at 18, 17, 16 about what was my life going to look like, it's nothing
Yeah.
that I thought it would be. And you do have, as a volunteer, a lot of imposter syndrome
Yeah.
or self-doubt because it is unpaid. You think that it's not, you're not as capable or as recognized as someone who is getting paid the equivalent of the work that you put in. But it's sometimes, like I said before, it's the yes and. It's like, well, if someone has said, we think you're capable and we think that you have the knowledge, emotional intelligence, and skill set and personality to take this on, I'm a big believer in have a go. Talk to people. Is there an opportunity for you to trial it out? Is there an opportunity to shadow someone to see if it is the right fit for you?
Yeah. Let's touch on this for a second, because I think you've highlighted a beautiful moment there that you never were searching for, right? I think a lot of people following a similar journey to you, they're not doing it because it's a career progression necessarily. There are some, and credit to everyone doing it, but it's a lot of the time you're head down, bum up, just sort of operating, right? You're not putting your hand out saying, how am I going? Is this going to help me with my next job? And then for someone to pull you up and say, hang on, you're actually really adding value here, it probably would have caught you a bit off guard and made you reflect a little bit to go, hang on, I am adding a bit of value here as well.
Yeah, I think because in all emergency services, it is a male dominated
Yeah.
industry
Yeah.
and it is very hard to see female leaders shine
Yeah.
and female leaders have a voice. So I think that was probably the biggest voice in my head,
Yeah.
is that I see these leaders that I look up to in emergency services, whether that be St John, SES, RFS, even New South Wales Ambulance as well, and going, oh, I don't see myself standing along the side of them and being with them. And sometimes you do need that little bit of a push
Yeah.
to say, yes, you do.
Yeah. I mean, it's fantastic learning and development for you to recognize, to communicate that to others that are the same were you, however long ago, to be like, hey, you're doing a great job here and we really value you. In particular, when we'll talk about how St John's engages volunteers, but I just think that's a good highlight of the importance of that acknowledgement, I suppose. And she didn't need to probably come and tell you that, but she did.
Yeah, and that's a big thing in St. John, is our ability to recognize and value our volunteers. We have a big award system that I think adds a lot of value to the volunteering experience. But also, when I was a leader, it was always about how can you say thank you to a person? How
Yeah,
can
sure.
you... I didn't mention this before. I actually had 3 rules when I was a leader,
Cool.
which was, don't make anyone do something that you wouldn't be willing to do yourself. So don't accept an event where you're out in the rain for 12 hours with no shade and no food, because you probably wouldn't want to do that. The other one was, don't be a jerk, because we're not being paid to be here. So if your attitude or your personality is like that, people are just going to walk out the door. And the other one was, make everyone feel included. So that could be ensuring that when you're running an event, that you're teaching people how to use the equipment. It could be when you're sending some emails that you CC people in, that it's good for them to have awareness. Or it could be you see someone who might be a different age demographic, or someone who is different than you, and walking up to them saying, hey, do you want some help? Or, hey, I'm going to, go through how to do slings at the moment. Do you want to go through it with me? Those are the big, easy things that you can do that make a
Mm-hmm.
big difference to running a team.
Yeah. Brilliant. I think that's people listening as well to have set those sort of foundations, right, of like how you operate, your mandate. I think that's really helpful learning. And then for St John's and maybe a lot of people listening, right, that are volunteer managers and work in the volunteering space, you would have been pretty nervous about that big interview and the big process. I mean, you spoke to the last candidate, got the intel. Talk to us about that experience all the way through to getting that job.
Yeah, so like I said, did normal EOI as you would do for any other job, put a cover letter together and my resume. And then the first lot of interviews was on why I want this role, what would I do within this role, and just, having some questions about the values and behaviors expected within the organization and what's expected of that leader. And then there was a follow-up after that one about where my gaps were and where I could demonstrate that better, and where I could really, they knew that I had that knowledge, and about being able to having like almost like a coaching conversation to set me up better about what they were actually looking for.
Yep.
So I don't know if they did that with any other people, but I valued that because it was a time of people being in hyper awareness and probably not articulating themselves very well when we were in lockdown and dealing with so many other pressures outside of volunteering, because at that particular point in time, we had no events, we had no face-to-face time with volunteers. So I think volunteering didn't always come as a primary thought in the world.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, you joined at such a crazy time, and I guess that's been the last few years.
Yes.
Wild journey you've been on, I suppose. Is there any highlights or anything you'd like to raise around the last couple of years there on that journey, and also the balance, how you found it?
So highlights. Oh, there's so many I can think of. I think getting my Order of St John was pretty amazing. So what that is that someone nominates you within the organization for the order. It's a long process. It takes more than a year.
Wow.
And you get a nice fancy medal for it.
Have you got them there by chance?
I do. I have this one.
Oh, I love it. Look at that.
Wow. And it was a pretty amazing experience because you go to the New South Wales Parliament House, which looks over the Sydney Harbour on a beautiful day, and you get this award presented to you for doing something amazing. So it's not just about being a volunteer, it's about what impact did you make to the organisation above and beyond for your role. So I got it for doing a lot of work in projects for that increased inclusion within the organisation.
Wow, lovely.
And this was before I became Deputy Commissioner as well.
Oh, perfect.
And and my mum and my husband got to come along, and my mum talked about the last time she was there, which was in the early 70s when my grandfather accepted a MBE. My grandfather has since passed, but it kind of felt like that almost, where you talk about generational that experience of what does your parents pass down to you, what do your grandparents pass down to you, and that kind of full circle moment of, I looked up to both sets of my grandparents a lot about what they achieved in their lives, and I hoped that they would be proud of me as well.
How beautiful for your mum to see both sides of that and watch you come through. Oh, that's lovely. And random side note, you touched on your husband there. You've got a random little story for me about the dog show. And for our international listeners, this is a beautiful show in Australia of people that adopt dogs. I know it's in other countries too, but talk to me about that little journey quickly because I'm fascinated and I love the show.
Yes. So my husband and I were on the Dog House Australia. They actually have the TV show in the UK as well.
They do, yep.
Friends of mine in St John recommended that he and I apply because we were looking for a dog and we wanted a rescue dog, but we were unsure about where to find one and to find one that was going to suit our needs. So my husband has a disability. He is fused from C5 to L2. For those people who understand the spine, it's a daily struggle for him in terms of pain management, in terms of working full time. He often gets told by doctors and surgeons, you should just not work. And he tells them, similar personality to me, watch me do it. So we met actually on a dating app, but we connected straight away because we actually figured out we volunteered for a mental health charity.
Oh, there you go.
But just in different states.
Yeah.
and he had just moved to New South Wales,
Yeah.
and we met, and it was, yep, we traveled even to Philadelphia within the first year of dating to volunteer together
Wow.
at an event called PAX Unplugged.
Yeah.
He
What's PAX again? Is that the gaming? What's
Yeah. So my husband is a gaming
Yeah.
journalist.
Okay, right. Awesome. All right. So you both enjoy that well, don't you? Yeah,
Yes,
I love
yes,
it.
that's one of my outlets. But to get back to
Yeah,
our dog,
back to the dogs. Yeah.
I think volunteering for a TV show is kind of similar to volunteering. It's the yes and let's have a go. Let's see what this does. We applied. It was a long process to apply. We had to put up a video and then have an interview, send some photos, fill out a survey, and then we went to the Animal Welfare League shelter, talked about our story, talked about who we were, and in particular, my husband said, I want a dog that has special needs, a dog that needs that extra bit of care. And then we met our lovely dog, Mr. Norman, who is a three-legged dog
Oh,
who
wow.
lost his leg only just before we adopted him through another dog attack. And
Oh,
it
no,
is the best thing in our lives.
really?
He
Norman.
is just so perfect for us. We never knew we needed him until we got him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just, yeah, he has his own Instagram page even
Really?
because we love sharing photos of
Did you
him.
give him the name Mr. Norman, or was that his name?
That was a name he was given, and we decided it was so
Oh,
perfect
I
and
love
so amazing that we wanted to keep it.
it. Oh, that's beautiful. I'll have to watch the episode following this. Okay, so then back to your journey. Wanted to make sure we got the dog story in there. Deputy Commissioner, St John's, New South Wales. But in the I say in the background, but really in the foreground, you're also working full time with the SES. Do you want to talk to us a bit about, did those start dates collide at all, or were you doing this before one another, and how do you balance them?
So about, when was that? That was about June, July. I decided that I wanted a change from the university sector. I had worked there a long time. I had my long service leave. I had done some pretty amazing things like doing archaeology all around the world and going to international conferences, but I wanted to keep pushing myself and keep learning and growing, which I felt I wasn't doing anymore within the role at the university. Things had changed quite a lot as well with how universities teach and run, and I wanted to keep growing as well. So I had recently became a volunteer with State Emergency Service. The reason why I started doing it was because I had recently bought a house. I had decided that I wanted to make new friends in my local community, but also have an opportunity where I wasn't the boss, where I was the person who just picked up the tools and followed direction. I think sometimes being a part of a leader is learning how to be a good follower. And I wanted that opportunity. And one day in my inbox, there was an EOI for volunteers to come and work for the State Emergency Service as a change manager. And I didn't know what a change manager was, but I opened it up and went, oh, what's this?
And you're
I
like,
had
I've
a
been
look at
doing this
what
for years.
and that was exactly it. I have been doing this for years. I'm a big believer in anytime you're doing a project or doing a rollout, you've got to communicate again, and then communicate again. And that's exactly what it read to me. And I put my hand up that night. I think I put a EOI together, sent it across, and about 2 months later, I started working for the State Emergency Service, which was mid last year.
Yeah, okay. All right. Nice one. And then you said that you're spending pretty equivalent hours, not quite, but you're spending a lot of hours in the voluntary position as well. Like, what does a standard week look like for you? Obviously, full-time hours, I suppose, in the SES job.
Yeah, so like any other job, I work 9 to 5 in my everyday job, and then before work, I try and clear my inbox and answer my emails, and then in the evenings, once I've finished work, I'll then hop on to meetings, write project plans, look at policies, do all sorts of things. So I usually do another couple of hours on top of my full-time day to do the role. And then it's things like on the weekend running workshops, meeting with exec. Last night I went and visited my Chemical Brothers event and just, spending half an hour just going to say hello to the
Nice.
volunteers that are there, saying thank you for your time, checking in to see if there's anything that they need
Yeah.
or what I can do to support.
Oh, wow. I'll be there tomorrow. I'll go say hello to some volunteers for you down here at Mount Dunedin.
Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. And I guess with that job you're doing now in change management, looking at sort of like what's an example of sort of change management you're looking at? Is it systemizing operations? I know a big part of it for you from our conversations we've had is around, as you touched on, the communications, but just making sure everyone understands why you're doing something. What does a classic project look like?
So I'm working in the training improvement program. So
Yep.
that's looking at the training that happens across the state emergency service and looking at those opportunities where we can make improvements and make things easier, flexible for volunteers, because not every volunteer looks the same. A volunteer in Sydney Metro doesn't have the same needs as someone who is in Broken Hill. They have different needs in terms of technology, in terms of how they want to learn, what skill set they need for their unit. So how can we change how training is delivered and what resources are available to them in order to make it work for them?
Brilliant. Nice one. And I guess with St John's, is there any projects that you're working with there, or is it the roles distinctly different?
They're distinctly different. And obviously, even just if you think of it from a leadership standpoint, they're two totally
Sure.
different levels.
Yeah.
But I think I have a lot of learning points. I think they influence each other quite a lot
Yeah.
in terms of my decision making.
Yeah.
But yeah, there isn't any overlap between the two. But I think there's enough difference that I feel like in St. John, it's very operationally focused and very working with my direct reports.
Yep.
While in SES, it's very much looking at how I can influence and how I can make an impact with a lot of the managers that I'm working with and a lot of the people
Yep.
and volunteers.
Yep.
But I think the biggest commonality, which was very hard for me to grasp when I took on both these roles, is that both of them look at the whole entire state. So every decision I make, it's not about affecting one person, it's about affecting, in SES, it's 10,000 people.
Sure.
In St. John, it's 3.5.
Mm-hmm.
So what am I doing every day to help and support those people?
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, understood. And if we touch on the awards that you've won, I was interested, is that something that you proactively, I know some of them you've been nominated for, but these awards, you have so many of them. Is it something you've proactively tried to apply for, or by coincidence, people have said, oh my God, you're doing a brilliant job. By the way, I've nominated you. How do they come about? Because you've uniquely qualified with quite a few medallions around your neck.
I have never applied for any award in my life. Is the answer to that. I do apply for scholarships every now and again because I love to learn and I like to keep learning. So that's something that I'm working on at the moment in my individual growth. But yeah, I think it's people wanting to recognize what I do. And I like to keep humble.
Yeah.
And I like to not be shouting to the rooftops about always what I'm doing.
Yeah.
A lot of people are very surprised when I say how much I do and what I do.
Yeah.
And yeah, the Western Sydney Woman of the Year award. So my husband actually was the one that nominated me for that.
Oh, good on him. Yeah.
Saw something on social media, I think, and then
Did he tell you he'd submitted you, or is this all a surprise?
it was a surprise. We had a conversation when he nominated me, and I was never expecting to win anything. So when we went to the dinner together, and I think there was like 3 finalists, so I was like, oh, 1 in 3 chance. That sounds pretty reasonable. I'll just go along and I'll see what happens. And then I got Volunteer of the Year, which I was ecstatic about. And then about half an hour later, after they'd done all the different categories, of which there was 13 potentially, I can't remember, I then found out I was Woman of the Year, which
Wow. You would have been thrilled.
Yes, but also I was just in shock.
Yeah.
I don't think it's set in for at least a good week.
Yeah. Did your husband know? Did he know and he kept silent? No?
He did not know either.
Okay, yeah.
No.
All right. Wow, what a night for you guys.
Yeah.
Well, for you, really. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, the achievements are it was not a loaded question. I presume that was the answer, but I'm sure lots of listeners would look at, because we'll put your whole bio on the podcast and look at it and say, how do you possibly get that much recognition? But I mean, it goes to show the character that you are and the journey you've been on, to just a lot of it, the head down, bum up, right? And just making an impact. And you got your sort of those three key things that you abide by, and that's taking your journey to where it is now. We're getting close to wrapping up. Probably two last ones. One is around sort of the St John's and maybe some of the fun stuff or crazy stuff you've been through, because that's always fun. And then the last one is around the question for the next guest that's coming on the podcast, to keep it interesting for them. Let's have time to think about that. But maybe firstly with St John's, from big day out in the early days and all these festivals, is there a moment that jumps out to you, or a beautiful interaction with the volunteers? Is there something that jumps out to you?
One of the most amazing stories was at an event called, I'll remember it in a moment, but one of my first ever major music festivals that I volunteered at Randwick. And I had never seen so many patients in one day that had alcohol and drug intox. And there was one particular patient who we didn't have room for. We didn't have enough space to give her treatment or a healthcare professional to see her. So I just sat with her and held her hand and talked her through it. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have that experience. And, just being there for her. And a year later, she came back to that same event and found me and gave me the biggest hug and told me how much that meant to her.
Oh, beautiful.
And how I didn't remember her until she said it. And again, it was that I had no experience. I didn't know what I was doing, but I had that gut instinct of, she needs me right now, and I'm going to do what I can.
Wow, that's special, hey? And again, I'm sure you've got thousands of those style interactions. Maybe the last one then, if you can think of a question you'd like to ask the next guest, often in volunteering, around what is your vision for volunteering? Is there change coming? Fun interactions, these sorts of things. What do you think?
Biggest question I ask every volunteer leader I meet at the moment is, how are we going to get more people back into volunteering? And how do we make volunteering easy?
Yeah, okay, great. Well, now I'll fire one back at you from Olivier from UEFA. So he oversees a ginormous program over in Europe for all football, and he's doing a thesis on volunteering, and fascinating podcast. I'm sure you'll have a listen to it. But his one is around as I touched on before, your vision of volunteering, and is the sector as a whole going to change over the next few years, or is it just going to still remain the same? You know what? It ties quite nicely to your question around how do you probably find more. But do you have a concept of that maybe, and especially given you've been in it for so long, right? And so how do you see maybe the next 10 to 15 years of volunteering? Are there any big changes coming?
I think AI is the one that's going to change everything. I am now having a lot of conversations about what is the role of AI in volunteering. Is there an opportunity for things like chatbots, or for onboarding, or for people who don't have an answer when they're out there? I think we can never replace the face-to-face people out there being that helping hand. But what we can do is inform and support those volunteers better by using systems and by using technology.
I love it. Okay, that's perfect. So we'll wrap it up there. It's been a really lovely time I've spent with you, understanding and learning more about your journey. So I hope our listeners get the same. And I'm sure they can hit you up on LinkedIn or places that would be the best place to go, I suppose, Marian?
Yes, LinkedIn.
Yeah, in case they have any questions or want to find out more about your journey, or how to get on a dog show perhaps. So if they've got any tips, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to the Engage Volunteer podcast. Join us next time as we continue our journey through the world of volunteering. Until then, stay engaged and keep making a difference in your community.